I got an email from a listener of this show who lives in Berlin. He's 26 years old. I actually met him when I was in Berlin. You never know what's going to happen, by the way, if you email me. I love hearing from listeners. I respond, and I've really gotten to know many people who listen to this show, and Dennis and Julie, and it's been just a thrilling, and hugely enriching part of my job. But I want to sort of introduce on this show, Timeless with Julie Hartman Live, more emails that I get from listeners because they are just so cool. I will read some segments from this email from Will about what's going on in Germany with regard to the Israel-Gaza war. He has some really interesting insights about the way that different factions in Germany are kind of dealing with this. But I've just got to give you a little tease of some other emails that I got. There's a fantastic young woman who's 18 years old, and she emailed me about a year ago. She listens to Dennis and Julie and Timeless, and she is a freshman at Hillsdale College in Hillsdale, Michigan, which is a conservative, I believe, Christian college. And she writes to me telling me about her classes that she's in. And the names of these classes, people, I got to tell you, I was reading them and I was thinking, why didn't I go to Hillsdale? They're so cool. I mean, I'm grateful I went to Harvard. I talk about this all the time. For all that I criticize Harvard, and it is worthy of criticism, I made the most amazing friends. I had fantastic opportunities, including, ironically, the opportunity to go to Israel nearly free of charge. I had a fantastic dorm, so I am immensely grateful for the college that I went to. But gosh, Stephanie, she writes to me and she's like, "Hi, Julie. I'm writing to you as I'm leaving great books of the Western canon." That's one of her classes. Another class is Western theological tradition. And she has this line in the email that's so cool where she's talking about learning about all the religious and spiritual and philosophical and legal backgrounds or underpinnings of Western civilization. And she said, history now has a face and character, not just a sparse outline. How cool is that, right? Okay, so then there's Stephanie. I'll give you just one other teaser and then I'll move on, I promise. But I could go on and on about how amazing these listener emails are. There's a biology student, also in her mid-20s. Her name is Eliza, and she just wrote to me and she said that she studies hummingbirds. Right? Cool. So I wrote back to her and I said, I don't know very much about hummingbirds. Would you be willing to regale me with some fascinating information about hummingbirds? And so she wrote me the coolest email, concise but very detailed and super eloquent. And these birds are so interesting. I've done a segment on the show about owls, but hummingbirds, my gosh. First of all, these gorgeous hummingbirds have all of these different colors. And she talked to me about the shapes of their wings and how light refracts off of the wings to induce these gorgeous colors. But male hummingbirds are the ones with all the vibrant colors because they want to attract women. It's sort of like the peacocks have the males are the ones with the big tails because they want to attract the females. And then female hummingbirds are the ones with the more drab or camouflagey colors because they're in the nest and they want to protect their eggs. And she was telling me that hummingbirds flap their wings at 100 beats per 1 second. Can you believe that? 100 beats a second? And then they're so exhausted that they have to go eat every 30 minutes. Anyway, you'll get a fuller idea of what these emails include. But it's just to say I feel so blessed to be the beneficiary of so many people's wisdom who listen to the show. You can always email me with questions, comments, criticisms, whatever you want at julie@julie-hartman.com. So let's get to Will. So Will, as I said, is a 26-year-old Berliner, i.e. he lives in Berlin. We met up when I was in Germany, and he's so cool. And he was writing to me about the way that German political factions, are dealing with the Israel-Gaza war, because there's kind of a more obvious issue in that vein in Germany, and it's that there is quite a history of persecution, indeed genocide of Jews in Germany. So people in Germany, with regard to the way that they talk about Jews, with the way that they talk about Israel, tread cautiously to put it lightly, on that subject. So let's just read a little bit of what he said about the left, specifically in Germany. So he says, what distinguishes Germany from other Western countries, in my perspective, is that our left largely remains silent when the topic is Israel because they enter real cognitive dissonance. On the one hand, they get the information from the rest of the global left that Israel is to be regarded as a genocidal, imperialistic, colonial apartheid regime. On the other hand, there's our notorious history with the Jews being victim of the largest genocide in human history, perpetrated by our ancestors, and our responsibility to act accordingly as a result. I think that's quite insightful. And, we tend to think of the global left as being a monolith, especially as we're looking at our own country and the insane explosion of pro-Hamas outbursts, anti-Israel outbursts. There's a Harvard-Harris poll that was recently conducted, and it said something like, I have it on my Twitter, by the way, if you want to check out the actual stat, but it said something like nearly 50% of people in my age range, Americans 18 to 24, think that the solution to the conflict is for Israel not to exist. I mean, it's really scary stuff. But how informative it is that in Germany, understandably, there's this real cognitive dissonance that the German left enters into. So then he continues with the new kind, if you will, of anti-Semitism or anti-Israel sentiment that is in Germany. And by the way, I just want to say, those are two different things. If you criticize Israel, you're not anti-Semitic. If you deny that Israel has a right to exist, if you deny that the Jewish state has a right to exist, then that is anti-Semitic. So I just wanted to say that up front, that I don't think that criticisms of Israel alone are anti-Semitic, because these terms get tossed around all the time. But let's continue with Will's email. He says, then, the Islamic protests against Israel and the outrageous amount of anti-Semitism imported through mass migration from the Middle East and North Africa are played down, this is in Germany, because Arabs are allegedly a suppressed minority in Israel as well as Germany. Then, they remind us of our own homegrown anti-Semitism, blowing up its pathetic remnants beyond any proportion. And then he says the remaining Nazis in Germany are the size of a high school reunion. Or just throwing this accusation of anti-Semitism or racism against the Arab protesters indiscriminately at anyone who differs with them on their assessment of where the new anti-Semitism is really coming from. And finally, they use this media-induced fear of the right to reinforce their, and he has the German word, but it translates to fear against the right, which merits a whole email in and of itself. Well, Will, please send that email to me. This is just a snippet of a much longer email that Will sent, but it is quite interesting too, not only to contemplate the kind of cognitive dissonance that, according to Will, and I'm not proclaiming to be an expert on Germany, I'm just, going off of what he said and some his observations, as well as things that I read online. But not only is there this kind of cognitive dissonance, it seems, among the German left, but among the German right, there also appears to be this real sense of being very careful with what they say and do with regard to Israel. And later in the email, Will observed that actually a lot of those on the German right are quite pacifist because of the history in Germany, obviously, of being the epicenter of World War II. This could be an entire episode unto itself, but it's interesting to contemplate, when people talk about Nazism, they refer to it as a right-wing ideology. And that's partially true, but that's also partially not true. Dennis actually has a really interesting video on this on one of his fireside chats and also on PragerU, where he says that Nazism actually standed for National Socialism. So there was sort of the right-wing component of nationalism, or extreme nationalism, but there was also indeed that left-wing component of socialism, even though, of course, the Nazis were anti-communist. But communism and socialism are two very different things. So it is quite interesting that Nazism has been fully associated with right-wingism when the history is perhaps more complicated. But even more than Nazism being left-wing or right-wing, really what it was racially supremacist. That to me, is the most accurate way to describe what German Nazism was. It was holding that one race, the Aryan race, was superior to all other, and everyone else must be subjected to that idea.